All right, for those keeping track, let me just say part 6 of this series is coming out shortly, following probably this video here. But let me just kind of explain how we've gotten here to this video. It's, like I said in my previous video, probably at this point, half, if not more than half of these videos have been completely unplanned, and here's yet another unplanned video. Angel mentioned in a video several weeks ago that, well, you know, if Moses meant to say the covenant was renewed in Exodus 34, well, he certainly knew the Hebrew and he would say renewed. That made me look, well, what is the Hebrew word for renew? And you know, we found out the Hebrew word for renew, meaning bringing back something into existence that previously existed, does exist. It is a true Hebrew word, and it doesn't even appear in the Pentateuch, none of Moses' writings. And then as I studied that word, I found the adjective form of that word, which meant new, as in not previously existing, like the new covenant of Jeremiah. And I went, oh, that's a problem for you Seventh-day Adventists. And I made the video following that. That has now led me to this video, which is going to demonstrably prove that Adventists who love going around saying, you know, show me in the Bible where it says the Sabbath has been replaced. Well, I'm not going to show you where the Sabbath has been replaced. I'm going to show you where the entire old covenant has been replaced, and that includes the old, however you want to say it, the old covenant, the Mosaic law, and all of that includes the Sabbath. Your blessed Sabbath has been abolished, revoked, replaced, and that is going to be what's proven here. It all started right here, you see here, Jeremiah 31:31. Behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant. This is a prophetic statement by Jeremiah that a new covenant is coming. And I'm going to show you here in a minute exactly when this was made. But you saw here in my previous video, 225F, where I showed, well, the Hebrew word for new, in this case, means what? Well, it's new and different. It's something that never previously existed. So new means new. Jeremiah 31:31 promises a new and different covenant. The new covenant is not in any form, character, or shape like the old covenant. New means new. That's it. I realize Adventists believe that the new covenant really didn't replace the old covenant, and that some of the features of the old covenant are still in existence today. Well, you know what? Adventists are just simply wrong, because the Hebrew word does not, the Hebrew language, which the Bible does not support your view. When Jeremiah says a new covenant is coming, he means completely new, going to replace the old. That's what he means. So let's understand this framework of Jeremiah 31 and God's promise of a new covenant being proclaimed. You know, before I do, I want to say I'm going to show you this here in a minute. And this is, if you're looking for a resource, this is probably a resource to get, because this is one of my go-to resources when I just want the answer for some historical time frames and some really good backgrounds. You're going to see the first 2 pages for the book of Jeremiah here, which does exactly what I wanted it to do. Give me quickly, succinctly, the view of, you know, when time frames of Jeremiah. And you're going to see that. And you're going to see this book here too. This is an exposition this is a commentary on Mark by a guy named Daniel Aiken that you're going to see here. But we're going to start with the Open Bible, and here it is. Very same book I held up. Good one to get. They got a New King James. There's other versions of this out there. I think a standard version, etc. But nonetheless, they all have the same data here. Here's what I was looking for. Time of Jeremiah. And I love these first 2 pages, which this book has on every book of the Bible. It does this. So we got, what's the time of Jeremiah? Jeremiah was a contemporary of Zephaniah, Habakkuk, Daniel, and Ezekiel. Isn't that just great? Nice to know that. Then it says his ministry stretched from about 627 to 580 BC. I'm just going to, and you can stop and read the text in the middle, because to me it's all very fascinating. But to save time, let's just jump at the bottom, where they take Jeremiah's prophetic time frame and put it into 3 groups. It says, thus there were 3 stages in Jeremiah's ministry. Number 1, 627 627 to 605 BC, where he prophesied while Judah was threatened by Assyria and Egypt. Time frame number 2, 605 to 586. He proclaimed God's judgment while Judah was threatened and, well, ended up finally being besieged by Babylon. And number 3, for 6 years, from 586 to about 580, he ministered in Jerusalem and Egypt after Judah's downfall. We turn the page in this very same book, and all the books of the Open Bible here have this chart here, which I absolutely love. And you could just sit here and study this chart and get an idea of that. We're looking for Jeremiah 31. Jeremiah 31, right, happened before the fall. It's within, of course, the total ministry of Jeremiah. So I can kind of put a time frame on when Jeremiah 31 was penned. And we can do that by going back to the previous page. So based on what we just looked at, Jeremiah 31 was actually penned about 600 BC and before the fall of Jerusalem by Babylon. Let this sink in. God, through Jeremiah, prophesied an end to the Old Covenant about 600 years before Christ and just before the fall of Babylon. It was in their Hebrew scriptures. The Old Covenant, now let's put it in a little broader timeline. The Old Covenant was established when Joshua conquered the Canaanites about 1398 BC. So the Old Covenant, you go from 1398 BC, it existed about 798 years. Then God prophesied through Jeremiah, the Old Covenant's going to end, and it's going to be replaced with a new covenant. So that about 798 years after the Old Covenant was established, we get this prophecy that, well, it's got a termination point. It has an expiration date. We don't know the date, right? God didn't tell Jeremiah the date, but he did say that time is coming, and I'm replacing it with a new covenant. So the nation of Israel, here's the whole point of this. The nation of Israel had in their prophetic book of Jeremiah, they knew the covenant they were living under since 600 BC was going to be replaced with a new covenant. They knew that from Jeremiah. Now, fast forward to the New Testament. We can see in the New Testament where Jesus is telling the Pharisees, hey, I'm the new is here, and you know what? The new and old are not compatible. Look with me here. Here are two parables in Mark 2:21 and 2:22. I drew this purple line here on purpose between these for this reason, because scholars do not think that 2:20 and 2:21 followed each other immediately. They agree that there's quite a long period of time between the words in 2:20 and 2:21 and 22. They don't know how much, but it's a rather abrupt change from 2:20 to 2:21 that it leads scholarship to believe, yeah, this didn't exactly follow 2:20 like in one conversation. So there's a break point here. But nonetheless, we have two parables by Christ. And let's look at these two parables. 2:21. No one sews a piece of unshrunk cloth on a garment. If he does, the patch tears away from it, the new from the old, and a worse tear is made. 2:22. And no one puts new wine into old wineskins. If he does, the wine will burst the skins, and the wine is destroyed, and so are the skins. But the new wine is for fresh wineskins. What's going on here? Jesus is basically saying to the Pharisees, the new is here. And you know what? And the new and the old, they are absolutely not compatible. Now, I want to show you here from this book, and as I was reading this book and researching this video, I thought, I'm not even going to paraphrase this guy's words in here, because I thought he did a really good write-up on Mark 2:21 and 2:22 that I just retyped it, and I'm just going to share it with you in terms of what he said, so let's read it here. He says this parable and the one about the path both illustrate the radical new era of Jesus' coming. Jesus is the new cloth and the new wine. He is not an attachment, an addition, or appendage to the status quo or the Old Testament. He cannot be integrated into or contained by pre-existing structures, which is what? Even Judaism, the Torah, and the synagogue. So the question is not whether the Pharisees will add Jesus' teaching, the new cloth on their old cloth, to their list of traditions and rituals like sewing a new patch on an old garment, but whether they will forsake the shadow of the old covenant and embrace the reality of the new covenant. Jesus is the new, and that's what he was telling the Pharisees. And the new and the old, they're not compatible. They're not the same. You can't do it. Adventists want to sew the new cloth on the old cloth, That's why you saw in the previous video, Adventists basically say, well, there's nothing new in the new covenant. Oh yeah, there is. It's completely new. And Jesus, when he was uttering those words on Mark 2:21, was talking to you, Seventh-day Adventists. Quit sewing your brand new cloth on the old cloth because you are making it worse. Listen to the words of Christ. Jesus is the fulfillment of prophecy. The prophecy given by Jeremiah in Jeremiah 31 through 33, 600 years before his birth. So Jesus is here now, 600 years later, after that prophecy, saying, I'm here, and it's new. And everything is going to change. And by the way, the old, not compatible with the new. Now, new in Greek carries essentially the same meaning as it does in English. There's nothing to really be changed there. We saw new in Hebrew in my previous video, and one of the varieties, one of the forms of the Hebrew word for new actually means, well, not previously existing, which is very similar to English. So we have Greek and Hebrew words meaning essentially the same as we understand them in English, which is something previously not existing. And in this case, it's going to be to replace the old. Now, let me just show you something here. I could show you this Theological Dictionary of the New Testament. Kaianos, the word for new, and it says new, distinctive as compared with the old and the other, and I can go on for pages. And by the way, here's all the resources that I looked up for this. I thought, oh my gosh, where do I start? Where do I stop? I'm not going to show all this, right? I could turn this into an hour-and-a-half video. So what I did was I picked one of these here. I picked this one I'm going to show you. But everything I'm going to show you here, it's in everything else. And it says the same thing. So there's no need to repeat it. So let's start right here. The Dictionary of the New Testament Theology, Volume 2. And look what it says. There's our word kaianos in Greek for new. And it starts off showing us how new is used in secular language. And it says what? Denotes that which is, well, qualitatively new as compared with what has existed until now, and that which is better than the old. Now we're going to switch and say, well, okay, now leaving the secular aside, let's go to the theological. And then point A, it says, most important is the use of new with covenant. And then it says, this cup is the covenant, is the new covenant of my blood. 1 Corinthians 11:25. Same thing in Luke 22:20. There it is. This is the cup of the new covenant in my blood. Right? Jesus is inaugurating the beginning of the new. He is fulfilling Jeremiah 31:31 right here in 1 Corinthians 11:25. Anyway, let's move on and see what else they say in the same paragraph. They say this: the words signify that the blood or the death of Christ is the basis of the new covenant. That's right. This is an evident link with Jeremiah and a fulfillment of Jeremiah. Let's keep reading to the next sentence. And it says Hebrews, and it's the book of Hebrews, it develops this theme of the new covenant further, contrasting the imperfect old covenant of Sinai with the perfect new one in Hebrews 8:6 and 8:7. And then it says here at the end, the quotation of Jeremiah 31 through 34 is explained thus. In speaking of a new covenant, he treats the first as obsolete. Hebrews 8:13. I want to expand on that very word right here. Here is Hebrews 8:8 through 8:12. And everything you see here in the purple text is Jeremiah 31 through 34. Look at this here. Hebrews 8:13 is not in Jeremiah 31 through 34. It's the author of Hebrews puts this text in here. And what is this text? Hebrews 8:13 is the God-inspired interpretation of Jeremiah 31 through 34. Look at what our author of Hebrews did here. He quotes Jeremiah 31 through 34, and then he says, about Jeremiah, in speaking of the new covenant, he, this is Jeremiah, makes the first one obsolete. And what is becoming obsolete and growing old is ready to vanish away. He has interpreted Jeremiah for us here by saying Jeremiah has just said that the new covenant is now going to make the old covenant obsolete. And he basically says this is going away. We have a God-inspired interpretation of Jeremiah 31 through 34. So we are told that when Jeremiah speaks of a new covenant, he understood the old covenant was obsolete and going to vanish away. He didn't know when at that time, but the very words that God gave him in terms of a prophecy of a new covenant coming, he know this. That's it. This is done. It's got an expiration date. Don't know what the date is, but it's got one. And well, now we can see it in the New Testament, 1 Corinthians 11:25. There's the end date of the old covenant right there. Now, Hebrews 8:13. It's clear, objective proof that Jeremiah prophesied the end of the Old Covenant 600 years before Christ. Adventists, here's your biblical proof that's declaring the entire Old Covenant is abolished and replaced with the new. And that means your Sabbath, by the way, because there is no Sabbath command for Christians in the New Testament. So there's your proof that you always want to ask for. Now, as Jesus illustrated, and look with me here, Mark 2:21 and 2:22, the new is not compatible with the old in any manner. This illustration to the Pharisee, and well, to the Adventist, it's timely and it's instructive to you today, Seventh-day Adventists, who are doing exactly what the Pharisees were doing back then. You're both sitting down trying to stitch new cloth onto old cloth, and the result, as Jesus says, you're just going to make it even worse. So, hey, Adventists, will you put away the old and accept the new? Because that's what Jesus was telling the Pharisees that they needed to do. The old has vanished and been replaced by the blood of Christ on the cross, which is the inauguration of the new covenant. 1 Corinthians 11:25. So we have Jeremiah 31 through 34, prophesying the old covenant's going to end and be replaced by a new covenant. Jeremiah didn't know the date. We now know the date. And the date is 1 Corinthians 11:25. That's the very beginning of the new covenant. So to force the old upon the new, as Adventists are wont to do, is to reject the new covenant and really reject Christ. You are rejecting Christ's blood he shed for the new covenant, because you don't recognize the new covenant, because you still keep the old. You're still trying to sew that new patch onto the old patch. And by the way, let me just end it right here. Christ is the mediator of the new covenant, not the old, the new. Therefore, if you are trying to hold on to a Christ who is in the old covenant and you're trying to mix the old and the new, you got the wrong Christ, you got the wrong covenant, you got the wrong mediator. Christ is the mediator of the new covenant only. There is no more old covenant. It vanished away. Hebrews 8:13.